Welcome, everyone. I'm Christy Turner, your moderator for this session. I'm a Razor's Edge Principal Consultant with Success Services, and I've been with Blackbaud 24 years. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone about the opportunity to win one of our 3 innovation grants. Winners will work directly with our 2024 innovation grant sponsors, Microsoft, NP Automate, and Sentinel Consulting for free to help bring their ideas to life. I'm going to put the link in the chat for you to go online to see more information. Applying is easy. You just create a 2-minute video pitch on your idea and why you think we should select you. There's no need for a polished presentation, so don't be intimidated. The idea is to get your idea accepted. So take a few minutes to share your idea with us, and we look forward to seeing your proposals. Deadlines are due today by 5 p.m. Eastern. Please use the chat and the Q&A session to ask questions and to talk to each other today. We'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, starting with the most ones with votes. Also, at the end of the presentation, we have a survey for you. This is important because if you like a session, share your responses in the survey. The winning presenters get a trip to BBCon. All right, so to get started, I'm going to introduce our 3 presenters today. We have David Springer, who's been at Blackbaud for almost 10 years. He's a senior product manager for RENXT with a current focus on query and database view. He's based in Indianapolis. Fun fact, he placed 8th in the Hungry Hippos World Championship. Shealy is also with us today. He is the Director of Software Engineering with 23 years at Blackbaud. His current role is Infrastructure Engineering Cloud Operations for Donor Management. His fun fact is he is visiting all South Carolina state parks in the year, and he is at 32 of 48 with still 4 months to go. So that's pretty awesome. Todd Yellin is a laureate software engineer with 26 years at Blackbaud this summer. His current role is a software architect for RENXT. He's based out of Arlington, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And today they're talking to us about APIs and queues and backups, oh my, and what to consider when bringing data out of RENXT. So I'm going to turn it over to David.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So I'll start out. She already introduced us, so I won't hover on this slide. But we're all happy to be here talking to you about these topics. I'll go over the agenda, kind of what we're covering first, and then we'll break out into each topic. So first, I'll start out talking about queue in Razor's Edge database view. Then I'll hand it over to Sai to talk about regular backups of your RE7 database. And then Todd will tell us a little bit about query API. And then we'll circle back to sort of how do you decide between these ways of getting at your data. And then we'll open things up for some Q&A. So without further ado, Queue, as you may or may not know, is a module in Razor's Edge. It is from years back, but it still exists in RENXT in database view now. And it allows you to run a series of RE7 functions back-to-back on a user set schedule. So for example, I can refresh a query, then include that query in an export to export the results, and then also include that query in a report to run a report based on those constituents or gifts. I can do those all at once or all in a row without any user interaction once the queue is set up. It automates your processes in any order desired, and it allows you to set up multiple queues that can run at any time of day, theoretically. One limitation that I do want to call out here, it is limited by database maintenance windows and application timeouts and export location. So this is occurring in your hosted database. So when maintenance is occurring on that database, obviously it's not going to be able to complete those queries and reports and whatnot. Application timeouts on maintenance evenings. So if you have a queue set to run at midnight and we're performing maintenance 11 to 2, it's not going to run. And then finally, for hosted databases, you can export only to your hosted files folder. So it's not going to go to your local machine or any of your organization's network folders. So a few limitations there. It's also probably goes without saying, can only give you access to the data that one of those existing modules gives you access to. So queryable fields, exportable fields, that sort of thing. So the big times you'll want to use Q are when you don't have that sort of coding experience to go in deep with SQL or the API, or when the extra processing of Razor's Edge modules are required on a schedule. So if you know you want a specific database view report, that database view report is accessible through Q. Also worth noting, this does not give you access to any of the web view only data because it's a database view function. So now I'm going to hand it over to Sai. He'll tell us a little bit about regular backups, and we'll circle back to sort of compare Q to the others in a bit.
Hey everyone, Sai here. I wanted to come talk to you today about another option here for getting to your data. That option be regular backups. So we offer a nightly, weekly SQL backup delivery mechanism. This mechanism is actually an additional paid service. So just want to call out that you have to pay for this, but it will deliver an actual SQL backup file of your data to you as a customer, right? So you do need to have your own on-premise SQL server ready, up, and able, and then be able to restore your data. But then you do have direct access, right? You can use SQL to access any of your data at any time. I do want to say that there is a limitation here. This is only for database view information. So if you're looking to try and get to additional web view information that does not exist in the database view, you're going to need to use one of these other options like Q, or heading off into what Todd's going to talk to us about. So this is offered nightly or weekly. So when we talk about nightly in that scenario, the data will be refreshed to you within 24 hours. So you need a scenario where you need data more frequently than 24 hours. This is not the best time to use it, right? So this is only if your data can be 24 hours or older. Just kind of working through some of the things on the slide here. I do want to offer to go ahead and show a demo. So how does this actually play out? So I'm going to share my screen, show you how this actually works using an internal canary tenant that we have. I'm clicking on screen. There we go. Thank you. All right, spinning. There we go. Okay, yeah. So this is an internal canary tenant that we have that's that I'm using here. So this is just regular RENXT. Going to go ahead and refresh the page. If you have paid for a nightly or a weekly backup, you can find that by accessing. So you have to log in, so it's secure, so that you're making sure that you're logging in. There's actually a permission that can be granted to make sure that you can even see this area or this tile inside the product. But I have that permission, so you come to the picker and pick the database options tab. It's going to load a couple of different tiles here. I'm going to go ahead and close these other tiles because I want to be able to show the focus here. So inside the product itself, we're going to actually deliver to you. In this case, I have nightly set up. So you'll see I have a link to be able to get to the June the 5th backup that would have happened, or the June the 4th backup, or the June the 3rd. So I have the ability to download these backups. In an effort to go ahead and be secure, following security best practices, these backups are backed up with a specific certificate that is unique to you as the customer who is paying for this service. It also has unique private keys. So you do have to go onto your version of your SQL Server, and you're going to have to run a commandlet that is going to download and use the certificate and the private keys to install onto your SQL Server. If you do not complete this step, you will not be able to restore the data. So you need to take care of this. Actually, if you click, it says create the certificate locally, copy and run this on your local. So if you click this show commandlet, it'll show you the exact commandlet to run. I'm not going to show it because it actually includes the private key, right? So for security reasons, but if you run all of this on your SQL Server, then you can download these back files. You can restore them to your SQL Server, and then you can use SQL Server and run any transaction SQL statement that you want to be able to query your data. So at this point, we'll take questions at the end. So I just want to make sure that I am going to stop sharing and then hand over to Todd, who is going to start talking to us about the query API. So Todd, over to you.
Thank you, Sai. I will just share my screen. Okay, yeah, so talking about the third area, about how to get data out of your system. If you haven't heard, we are working on porting the query area of database view over to web view. And so I'm showing kind of a little bit of a preview of that. So the UI features are available already, are generally available already for FE/NXT customers. We're currently in an early adopter program for RENXT. But with the addition of WebView query comes the addition of query to Sky API, which represents a new and powerful way to get data out of the application. Query API, again, is already generally available to FE/NXT customers, but will actually be rolling out to RENXT customers shortly, and that's what I'm going to give more detail about here. There was actually an entire session on Query API yesterday called Come Explore the New Query API for RENXT and FE/NXT, which goes a bit more in depth and actually shared some customer experiences and plans with the API. So I recommend you go check that out as well. I did not do a demo in that session, so I'm going to do a demo in this session to show you how the API works and what you can do with it. So this is the Sky Developer site showing the Query API. Bunch of endpoints available, and I'm going to demo some of the most important ones. So there is, like other APIs, there is an endpoint to get a list of queries. Just have to authenticate to the environment I'm using. There are a bunch of filters that you can use to pare down the list of queries you want. I'm not going to set any of those just for the demo purposes. That's why I submit my request asking for a list of queries in the environment. And the response includes an array of query objects, providing you with kind of the top level information, not all the details of the queries that meet the parameters you specified in the request. So you can then drill down and get the complete details of an individual query using this get query endpoint. I'm going to ask for query with the ID 608. And so this provides kind of the same core information as was on the list endpoint, but now includes the complete definition, so details on all of the selected fields, all of the filter fields, basically everything that would be needed it's the complete picture of the query. So much more important to this discussion, though, is actually running a query to get the data returned by that query. So there's two endpoints for doing that. The first one is to run an existing query by providing its ID. So this endpoint has a more complicated request body. I have one prepped, so I'm going to use that same query by ID 608. And then there's a bunch of different fields here. One I will call out as the output format. The available values here, you can get a file as a comma-separated list of values, a JSON array, or a JSON-L file. I'm going to use JSON-L because it's kind of the most compact for demo purposes. And what this does is, so query, this query I'm running is actually pretty quick, but some could take a while to run. And so what happens is that when you submit a request to run a query, it runs a background job. And the response to this endpoint request is the ID of that background job. So what you then do is go to this endpoint called get query execution job status. I copied the job ID from the response of that previous request. And so now I'm putting that in here as the ID that I'm requesting. There are a couple of options here that we want to set in order to actually get a file out, which is this include read URL parameter. And I'm saying I want those URLs, and I'll explain what they're for in a second. I want that URL once the job is completed, and I'd like to download the file as an attachment. When I send that, did I not? Oh, the job is still running. Not used to that. When I tried it every other time, the job completed. So this is showing what happens when the background job is still running. And so what you can do is hit it again. And of course, my live demo failed. So let me try a different option. So the second thing that I was going to show was this other endpoint that's generating a lot of excitement, which is instead of executing a query by running an existing query by providing its ID, you can run a query by providing the complete definition of that query. So it doesn't even have to be a query that's saved in your database. And the request body of that is actually, pretty complex, as you would imagine. It's the complete specification of a query, including its select fields, filter fields, sort fields, for filter fields, what operators to use, the filter values, everything about the query. And this can be quite difficult to construct. And I think there will be various tools for helping you construct that. But one thing that we wanted to do was, the best way to build a query is, of course, going to be the query UI. So I'm going to show that. If we say, I'm going to just build a query where it says, I want people who are younger than 40, and I just want their last name and first name, and we'll go ahead and sort by last name and first name. And by the way, so I'm showing functionality, which is, I can create new queries or edit queries. Even to our EAP customers, this is not out yet. So this is a bit of a preview of what's coming. So I've constructed my query. Normally, you might go to the results tab in order to run that query. I'm going to go to options. And again, in this kind of preview state, there's a button here called Copy Query JSON. And what this is doing is producing the JSON representation of this query in the form suitable to pass to the API, either when those endpoints are available, either to add it via the API or edit it via the API, or pass it to that ad hoc execute endpoint. So I'm going to copy the JSON, come back here, and I'm going to replace the query piece of this request on the ad hoc execute request. So I just pasted in the definition of the query that I just created in the UI. So see it here, it has my filter field saying less than query field ID 880 is constituent age, less than 40, and it has both of my select fields. And I will leave the other values there. So let's hope this goes better than the initial run. So here's that job ID again. I'm going to take that. Put that back into this endpoint. There we go, that's better. So it says the job completed, and once the job is completed, based on that parameter I set saying give me the URI, it gives you this URI, which basically you hit to go get the file. And then the response here also includes a row count, so 30 rows were returned. So I can just demonstrate this by putting that I copied that URI, I'm putting it in a new browser tab. It just downloaded the file to my machine, and I can show what's in that file. Keeps popping up on my other monitor. So there are the results. So last name, first name, sorted as I requested. I ran the query in a mode where it includes this QREC ID column, which is in this case, the constituent record ID as well. So that is what I wanted to, that's the demo around Query API. I'm going to pass back to David to talk a little bit more about how Query API compares and contrasts with the other options.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Okay, we're back on slides. Beautiful. So yeah, as Todd showed, the Query API is going to give you direct data access to any field available in Query. And when you get that data, when you eventually are able to add queries, you'll be able to sort of connect that to outside applications. And so depending on your level of comfort with coding, that can allow you just incredible flexibility using that query data. It'll also allow ad hoc queries, as he showed, creating queries, updating them, running, deleting, and exporting queries in real time. So as with query in database view, you have the option of using static and dynamic. So those dynamic queries are going to be real-time data, access to the data. One limitation I do want to note with the Query API specifically, as with query for many-to-one fields, it can result in duplicate rows. So if I am outputting a bunch of gifts for a constituent, I may see their name multiple times. So that's just kind of something you need to keep in mind when you're working with the results. So the big use case here is real-time access to data, and you have some comfort with or willing to learn to write or adapt API calls. And when we talk about queries specifically, obviously it's only applicable when query data is sufficient for your purposes. It is worth noting we have a number of other APIs with different endpoints that give you access to those fields that to different types of fields. So if the Query API doesn't give you access, you can look at those other APIs to see if it gives you access to what you're looking for. So then when we talk about which to use, what is most appropriate to your purposes, just to sort of summarize here. With Q, there's no coding required. It's all working within the user interface of database view. And it can perform those RE-specific functions. So the reports being the big one that people like to use. Big limitations of Q are that it is only working with that database view data, not the web view only data like attachments. It's also limited by your export path, maintenance windows, and hosting timeouts. Backups, it does provide you the entire database view database. Again, no access to those web view only pieces of information. It is also pretty flexible if you're comfortable working with SQL. But the other kind of limitations to call out, there is the extra cost involved, and nightly backups being the most frequent, or that's the most recent the information is going to be. And then Query API does give you real-time access. It allows you to connect to other applications, but it does require some coding. You need to kind of get familiar with that to work with it. And then again, it's limited to query module data, but most people are aware query gives you access to a lot of information. So in many cases, that will probably meet your needs. One thing to consider, and I think I've seen a couple of people mention this in the chat as well, a hybrid option may be best for you for now. So like maybe you can access Query API to, to get most of the data you need, but you still need to rely on Q for the moment to get a specific report or a backup, because maybe for an audit you require having a backup of your data. So just consider that these are all options, but they may not all be the complete picture of what is best for you. So with that, I think we will go ahead and open it up for some Q&A. I know the chat is flying along, so I love to see that. Christy, any big themes that we should address?
Yes. During Sai's presentation, he mentioned that the database backups do not contain all information that might be visible in the web view. They asked if that was correct, and if so, does each RENXT instance build on top of a legacy database and a new database?
So that is correct. Yes, there's web view only data. A big one is attachments. So if you attach it in web view, that exists only in the web view data. And so when you get a backup, those attachments are not included. There's some nuance to sort of how the data is stored. Thinking of it as a legacy database and a new database isn't quite correct. Web view data is kind of dispersed among different services and storage options. But yes, that is essentially correct. With both Q and the nightly backups, those are giving you only the partial picture of database view specifically.
And then he also asked, what terms do Blackbaud employees use to refer to those two databases?
I mean, the database itself is talking about database view. I think the terms you're most likely to hear are database view and web view, or web view specific data. Todd, I'm not sure if you've heard about other terms. Sometimes we'll refer to like blob storage as kind of the web view data. But yeah, I think it's generally you'll hear database view and web view as the primary division.
Yeah,
And then,
since you just mentioned it, David, yeah, I agree with that, right? We use web view for web view, and then we use database view for database view. Over to you, Chris.
Yep. There's a couple of questions about queue and backup option, if they'll be still available once database view is gone.
Yeah, so we are actively working to bring database view functions over to web view. So Todd mentioned query is one we're hard at work on right now, reports as well, export and import are coming up soon. We realize that Q and the backups provide a valuable service currently. The plan is that as we bring more of those database view functions over to web view, a lot of that need will be met by the APIs, by the ability to schedule reports, for example. And so what we will do is we will bring those functions over. We'll get to a point where, those are complete, and then we'll evaluate, okay, what is Q still needed for? What are these backups still needed for? And determine how best to meet those needs when we're in a fully web view world.
Thank you. They're also asking, will you be able to join different record types in the new query, like fund records to constituent records?
Like creating those relationships, yes. I thought I saw another good question. Let me see if I can find it.
There's a couple that have been answered already. Will we be able to write out a query using SQL?
Yeah. So let me go find it. I actually meant to show this earlier. Let me find the example. I will share my screen as soon as I get this environment to load. If you want to move on to another question, I can come back to that one.
Can a user obtain additional training regarding use of API coding in order to perform what you showed here?
That's a great question. I don't know that we offer that currently. Let me get back to you about that one. I should have that answer ready, and I do not. I know we've been talking about, as we introduce more and more API options, that would be really valuable. But I don't think it's in place yet. Yeah, Christy, if you could take that person's information. Okay, great.
Vincent says, if I followed correctly, the query API can be used when there is no endpoint yet for specific data.
Meaning there's no API, no other Sky API available for a given record. I'm going to assume that's what you mean, and the answer is yes. Yeah, like whatever fields are available in query are available through query API. David, does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does. Okay, so I've got the screenshot here. I saw this question before. I'm going to share my screen really quick. So this is related to I think I have to stop sharing the slide and then share my screen. Okay, so this is, someone asked about SQL with the query. So this is criteria tab. On the options tab, which is a new piece for WebView query, we've got buttons to copy query SQL and copy query JSON. So those give you the ability to copy it and then use that directly in the API if you would like to, or you can write it out if you're comfortable doing that.
Awesome. Another question on NXT query. Will we be able to query on WebView only data? For example, write a query of all attachments or all records without a profile picture?
So we are still kind of determining which specific WebView only data is most useful. So that's one of the pieces of feedback that's coming later. First goal is to get everything that works in database view query fully functional in WebView. And then we'll be kind of visiting those, what do you need to plug queries into in WebView? What WebView only data do we need to give access to? So attachments and profile picture is one I haven't heard of. So that's a good one. I'll note that down.
Can we use the API to get data from query directly into Power BI, or just to download the file and load from there?
Yeah, you can connect to Power BI, where actually there are, I should be more familiar with this. We have a connector that we are working on. I believe we're going to have a certified connector soon. It's not there yet, but I know a lot of customers do use it with Power BI.
And then Dana's asking about the WebView query, if they'll be able to use multiple ands and ors, that they have existing queries that they update monthly. They just want to make sure they can continue to.
Yeah, the goal is for any database view query to continue working in WebView without any issue. There are a couple minor exclusions to that. Query lists are not being brought over to WebView, and giving score queries are sort of the major categories.
Great. In the query ad hoc endpoint, it doesn't support the date filter. Will that be coming?
That is one of the next fields we're working on. We're actively at work on date fields now. I see a couple questions about timelines, so I'll go ahead and cover that.
Okay.
So query editor, it's in EAP now. It's in early adoption now. We are shortly going to release the ability in early adoption to add and edit. So we'll get a feel for, adding and editing, how is that meeting people's needs and get feedback on that. And we aim to have query in most customers' hands by Q4. And another point regarding timeline, Query API is actually going to be coming sooner than that. So within the next couple weeks, we're going to open up what we currently have, which is the view only. So a lot of the stuff that Todd was showing, and then add and edit is going to be coming a little bit later. But you can start playing around with the Query API in just the next couple weeks.
And does that include, when is the query editor coming?
Yeah, so the editor is the Q4 piece I mentioned.
Okay, perfect. Does the query ad hoc return only the SAS_URI response, or would it provide a JSON response as well?
Yeah, I answered that one. I can read my
sorry.
answer. So yeah, so the SAS URI in the response is a link to download the file, and the file will be in whatever format you specified when you ran the job. So that could be CSV, JSON, or JSON-L.
Someone asked if the Query API needs a separate license like Insight Designer does. It does not.
And scrolling through the questions, I think we got most of them. Sunshine made a comment, it would be great to query on emails sent to constituents as well. Another review functionality.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that down. Thank you.
We have a few more minutes. Anybody have any additional questions?
I see specific timeline for the Power BI connector. I don't have that offhand, but Jonathan, I can follow up with you about that. And it will be, with anything like that, it'll show up in the API community. So if you're in there, you can look for, the blog post announcements and that kind of thing.
A new question just came in. What promises, if any, does Blackbaud make regarding the behavior and stability of HTTP APIs? Do you use or plan to use API versioning?
David, do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, I'm sure there must be documented somewhere those promises, but in general, they are so endpoints initially come out in what's labeled a preview state, where we don't make a lot of promises, but once they go out of that preview state, we promise not to break them. So we will not make any changes to them that are breaking. If we do need to make some kind of change like that, then yes, we would publish a V2 or whatever the next version number is of that endpoint and encourage people to shift to that. So once a preview is in long-term support, it should be stable, and you should reasonably expect it to not change on you in a way that would be breaking for any existing requests.
There's another question on timelines, if there's a link available to share that timing.
I don't believe we have it documented because the timelines always shift. So as soon as we document it, it would become out of date pretty quick. So there's nowhere that you can kind of link and follow. But right now we're looking at Q4, the beginning of Q4. I do see a question about differences between a database view query that runs but returns an error about a not unsupported field through the API. And the reason for that is we are actively working to support each data type and each field type. We have to do separate work for each of them. So when a query has a field that is not yet supported in WebView, you can still make that call through the API, but we'll return a message that a field in it is not yet supported. And so by the time we fully release, that will go away, and anything that runs in database view should also run in web view. Okay, so we may have slowed down here. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to let us know. But yeah, I hope this has been useful for folks and gives you sort of a good grounding of what the options are and how to think about getting to your data. And as a few people have mentioned, you know, with the work to move everything to WebView, the backups and queues, you know, this will be shifting. So the options will be growing in the APIs, especially over the next couple years. And so this would be a very different presentation, you know, 2 years from now, but happy to provide what we have currently.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your presentation today. I'm about to launch the survey. Remember, please respond to the survey because the best responders get to go to BBCon. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.